Yeah, okay, recording now. I'll go to this. Okay, so tonight's meeting is about multiple exposure blended in camera. So there is an urban myth that doing multiple exposure in your camera is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Well, I'll show you that with practice, you can find out what you're going to get and have fairly predictable results actually. So the background is one of my multiple exposure. And again, there's no Photoshop involved in blending images together. So obviously you can do a lot more in Photoshop. If you have layers, you can move the pictures in your composition. You can't do that in camera. But you still have a lot of options you can do. So why would you do this? If you want to create images that are abstract, that are interesting without Photoshop or GIMP or any of the programs with layers. The pros, obviously, you don't need Photoshop. The other advantage, and you get feedback right away in your camera by looking at your LCD screen. The camera does the blending, it shows it to you on your camera. Some cameras, mine does that, it will let you choose the starting image. If you're doing a sequence, 3, 4, 5, 6 images, you can choose something you shot yesterday as the starting image, something you want to work on that you're not nearby at the time. So you can do that. In my camera, which is a mirrorless camera, I think it's the same for any other DSLR. When you shoot, you see the previous image in your viewfinder, which helps greatly in aligning the different shots because you keep shooting and you're trying to remember where things are placed in your composition while you see the previous image. So you can see through it and align things. In my camera, the final blended image, it's still a raw image. If you're shooting in RAW, my final blended is RAW. It's not a JPEG. If you're shooting in JPEG from the start, you'll end up with a JPEG. That's right. And again, another advantage in your camera, you can have a setting where you're keeping each individual images used for the final blended shot. You'll see that in a minute or two. Or you can decide to keep only the final resulting image. If you're concerned you don't have that much memory left in your card, because you can go through a lot of stuff. You do series of 9 images at a time. You quickly fill up a card. Even if you're planning to use Photoshop at the end, I like to do it in camera because depending if you're using a dark or a light mode, we'll go through that in a second. Well, the camera will give you a preview what the composition will look like. If you want to readjust, change some of the images, well, you can shoot again. If you're not using the camera to look at the final result, well, you have to wait to get home to merge all the images together in Photoshop. The cons, obviously, if you're using Photoshop, you have a lot more filters and blend modes that you simply do not have in camera. If you're, as you will see, if you're doing series that involve shooting upside down with your camera, but that gets awkward. But you get used to it quite quickly. I'll show you in a second. And mind you, if you have a camera with a lens that has a color, and you can rotate the camera any way you want on the tripod, then that's much easier. Blend modes. My camera has a Canon, which is typical, I guess, has 4 different blend modes. The first one is called additive. second average, third and last would be the bright and dark mode. Personally, I never use additive. I never use average. I use bright or dark. Additive, it's more of a manual way to do things. You have to set your exposure compensation individually for each image. Takes time. I tried it. I didn't see the real advantage, so I didn't bother anymore. Average gives you a blend of the average of each pixel in your stack of images. And imagine you've got, I don't know, 3 images. The camera compares each pixel in each location of your sensor to the other one, exact same position of all the other images below in your series. So if it's average and you've got 3 images, it will simply, in the blended version, give the average exposure for all 3 pixels in that location. If you're on the bright mode, it will keep the brightest of those 3 superimposed pixels. And if it's dark, it keeps the darkest of those pixels. So here's an example. At the top, you've got the original scene. I picked something that has a lot of contrast. And underneath, you see the 3 different modes: dark, average, bright. Obviously, the dark blend is darker. I move the camera a little bit between each shot. 5 shots. So you see that there's a lot of the light part of the image are gone in the dark mode. In the middle, in the average, you got more middle gray kind of pixels. And in the bright mode, you see more of the light portion of the image. Oh, I forgot to say, if anybody has a question, please put it on the chat so Kevin can interrupt me if needed, and I can explain some more.
Yeah.
So there is a bit of another example. The 4 shots expose exactly the same way. I move the camera a little bit, and at the bottom on the side, on the left side, you see the dark blend. And on the right, you see the bright showing all the light colors coming through. So for example, on the straight side, the arrow is gone. Because I moved the camera a little bit, it kept just the white portion of the arrow. And obviously, a lot of the shadows are gone from the building in the background. Same idea. At the upper left, that is the big wheel in Old Port, Montreal. Structure is typical. There's many of those around the world. They're about, I don't know, 200 feet tall, with capsules that turns and people go for a ride. So on the right, I took 3 shots, each at a fast shutter speed. I was set on the bright mode, on the bright blend, and I moved the camera between each shot. So what the camera kept is the white structure of the big wheel, and the black, the glass in each capsule is black. It disappeared, and you see the lighter clouds in the background. And on the left side at the bottom, I did 9 shots. In that case, I didn't move the camera. The wheel was turning. So in other words, I let the wheel do the motion. I shot 9 shots, put it on dark mode, so all the black bits came superimposed and showed through. And the white of the structure remained fairly intact. So a couple of shots taken downtown Montreal. I was there last September. The first one on the left is a sculpture on the street in front of a hotel, and 5 shots, dark blend. I moved the camera a little bit. It gives the shot, the resulting blend, sort of impressionistic style. And on the right, it was a tree in fall colors with graffiti on the wall in the background. Again, at the big wheel, there was that big inflatable pumpkin. Moved the camera a little bit. Dark mode gave it a bit of a impressionistic style. Same idea on the right. Bright mode, the wider the structure came through. On top of the gray or dark skies in the background, and some of the structure on the right was all white. Close up of the wheel from a distance. 5 shots. Again, I let the wheel do the moving, dark blend, and didn't move much, but the buildings came through over, in some places, over the white structure, even though they're far in the background. Now, on the example on the left, I put the camera in vertical position, and I 5 shots, and I just rotated the camera a little bit, about 15 degrees or so. And because I could see the previous image in my viewfinder, I used one of the focusing point in my viewfinder. I got a grade as well. And I picked the bottom of the shadow in the water, and I rotated, making sure that the bottom of the shadow was always in the same position. And you can rotate the camera, so I could, since I could see the tower in the background from the previous shot, I make sure they didn't overlap, and I created this arc like that.
Norman,
and on the right,
hang on a sec. 2 things. One, I just wanted to, I'm not sure if people heard, but you said it very quickly that you have your camera set on, so your viewfinder has a grid on it, and that helps you with the alignment of the images.
Yeah. I normally have a grid, and I normally shoot using the center point, focusing point. I only have one, but you can set your camera to show more than one. So if you're going to use a location as a focal point somewhere else in the camera, you can use that also as a reference. As you rotate your camera, you can put something you want in that location. It makes aligning all the shots a lot easier.
There's also a question on chat. Do you have to choose blend mode before you shoot images?
Yes. Yeah, well, I'll show you. I got several images of the LCD screen of my camera. I'll show you it in a minute. And the shot on the right is simply 2 shots. I rotated the camera 180 degrees, dark blend. So you see a reflection on the water on top and at the bottom. So because I was shooting in dark blend, the water itself with the ripples is actually a little bit darker than the sky. So when I rotated the camera, it simply, put the sky in the background. I couldn't see it. So I'll show you what I did in this one. 4 shots, 90 degrees, fast shutter speed, handheld, dark blend. Obviously, there's only buildings on the 2 sides of a street. In fact, the woman in blue on the left side, I never saw her. I was focusing on getting a rotation point at the back that I was looking at. I never saw her going by on the sidewalk. So to give you an idea how to do this, on the top row, that's how you're shooting. On the left side, your camera is horizontal. You're obviously looking through your viewfinder. So the left side, in this case, is where the woman in blue was standing. There's the top, bottom, right. Now imagine you're rotating your camera 90 degrees sideways, the scene looks exactly the same. Or I should say the other way. Now, the top of your sensor is to the left. And the left is at the bottom, right is at the top, bottom is on the right. You rotate the camera 180 degrees, it's the opposite. And when your camera is upside down, I'll show you in a second. Well, the scene hasn't changed, but as far as the camera is concerned, well, the top is now the street and the bottom is the sky. So when the camera processes the images, that's the second row, the photo on the left is the normal shot. On the right, the sky is on the right side of the frame. The third image, the sky is now on the left side of the frame. And then the last shot, the sky is at the bottom. It matches with what's happening on top. So now I've got buildings on the four sides of the image. The camera merges it. It keeps whatever is dark. So obviously the white sky will just disappear because on the other shots there's something darker to block it.
And you're not doing any camera movement there in terms
No,
of
I know.
slow
Fast
shutter speed. Right.
Yeah.
So everything's in focus pretty well. Yeah.
That's right. So just to make that clear, oops. Stop sharing and I'll put it on speaker. Oops. Can you see me or are you seeing Kevin? I'm not sure.
I see you, Norman.
Okay. You see the camera?
Yes.
Okay. So you shoot normally, you're like this. So the left side is this end. If I rotate like this 90 degrees, the left side is now the bottom. If I rotate the other way, 180 degrees, the left side of my sensor is now at the top. And here comes the awkward part. I have to shoot upside down. My shutter is easily accessible. And then it's easy. You can use your LCD with the grid, or you can look through the viewfinder, you take your shot.
You were going to explain how you use the delayed shutter when you're doing movement ICM.
Yeah, if you're doing, well, you see the next example. If you're doing ICM or panning at the same time for each shot, what I normally do is I go like this. I put my camera on 2-second timer and I'll position my camera to the side. I trigger, I count 1001, then I start panning and it takes the image where I want it. But the reason why I use a 2-second timer is because when I shoot, press the shutter speed, I don't want to wiggle the camera. I want a nice uniform panning across the scene. So I go like this, 1. You probably didn't hear the camera. And then I start again. If I'm going to do like this, I can pan, go the other way, and so forth. Because you're always panning in the same directions if you want to.
Great.
Share screen.
Okay. Quick question. What kind of camera is that? What kind of camera is it?
It's a Canon R5 full frame mirrorless.
Mirrorless. Okay.
Yeah. There's another example. This is a final square crop of an image, 4 shots, handheld, fast shutter speed, dark blend. And that's the scene. Again, no landscape mode first. Well, that's normally the order that I do that. Landscape mode, vertical one way, rotate camera 180 vertical the other way, and at the end, camera upside down.
Norman, there's a question. I assume the 4-shot sequence you did not pan.
No, and this one's it's fast shutter speed, no panning involved.
Yeah.
You all showed an example in the second of a shot with panning.
Yeah. Okay.
And again, camera, what it sees, because the camera doesn't know if you were rotating or not, right? Oh, yeah, that's right. I got this example. Now this is no rotation, no panning. It's what I call, I guess, multiple perspective. Multiple shots, 9. In this case, they were all landscape, looking forward, standard shot. But what I did in this case is took a shot, moved forward, took another shot looking right, moved forward, took a shot looking forward, moved forward, took a shot looking left. That's why you see at the top, I put some of the examples. You know, dead center on this parking structure, I look to one side, doesn't matter if it's overexposed, then looking the other way, 9 shots, and that gave me this final shot. Because it's a raw image, in Lightroom, I could bring back a lot of the details in the shadows and the highlights, and you get really unexpected results. I kind of like it. But this one, it's hard to tell what you're going to get. Now, if you have panning, I didn't actually have a picture of the original scene, but what it is, it's just looking at a wall, a stone wall, with a shrub in front of it, and the dark line are simply shadow lines and the stonework. So panning, the shadow becomes obviously a black streak. You lose details in the shrub, but it becomes a green blur. At the bottom of the screen, do the same thing, portrait, upside down. And then you got the green streak on the 4 sides of the image. And because it's on the dark blend, the green dark shrub shows up on all the sides, and the dark black shadow lines appear in the frame, and there is very interesting overlapping of these lines. It makes sort of a window frame.
There's another question in chat saying, well, I think you've already answered this one. Is it preferred to shoot with a tripod with a collar that rotates?
Yes, if you could. Yeah, I realized that very few lenses actually have an actual collar. Some people can buy it as an accessory to add. You'll get much more even results, because when you're panning, you're not necessarily panning exactly the same way from time to time, or rotating. So with a collar, you can rotate. I don't know if you can pan or not. You probably can.
The other question is, where did you get these shooting ideas from?
I went on a couple of workshops. Obviously, and last September, there was one in Montreal. It's a week-long workshops where you do just this. ICM, panning, multiple exposure. You actually have classes, you have homework. You have to produce for the next morning image review as a group. I did it twice. So it's a lot of fun. But there's plenty of videos online on how to do this sort of thing.
You've been practicing this for years, though. It's a bit of your specialty. Yeah. Yeah.
So again, it's a square crop. Now, it doesn't mean you have to shoot 4 times exactly the same shutter speed. In this case, I did 3 panning in 1 with a faster shutter speed. Normally, a panning, I'll go for 1/4 of a second, half a second, depending on the light conditions. And the top one, I think I used about a 60th of a second. It still wasn't fast enough because the image is a bit blurry, but I kind of like it, you know. And I put it at the top upside down to give it more of a abstract, you know, style to it. Because you can adjust, you can take your time. You don't have to go a quick burst of images. You know, you have one image, take your time, align yourself, and do it again.
Very creative, somebody's saying. Those are beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. This one, it was just the side of a tugboat and the port. I put that in because this was actually a total mistake on my part. I was planning to do 5 images, no, only 4 images. And then I realized halfway, like, geez, I got 5. In my camera, if I set the camera to, I know, 5 images, it shows up in the viewfinder. There's a little number at the bottom. And I know, well, first of all, I'm in multiple exposure. And 2, it tells me how many images I have in my series. And it shows it as a countdown. It starts, let's say, at 5, 3, 2. So I know where I'm going. So in this case, I had a mix of shutter speed. I was just curious to see what happens in this really high contrasty scene of the tugboat. And that's what I got on the first try. And I was just, geez, that's a keeper as far as I'm concerned. I really like it.
So painterly, wow, it's really quite.
Yeah, if you look carefully at the image, you can see the circle there. Well, it's actually one of the tires. And the tire shows up at different places. You know, it makes a real interesting image. Okay, camera settings. On the menus, again, this is a Canon camera menu. I'm sure it's a bit different from brand to brand. So the first one, the first row at the top, I go multiple exposure. Normally it's disabled. Punch on it for, you know, setting. It brings me to the second image. So disabled at the top, and then I have turn on multiple exposure as function/control. I'll tell you in a second the difference, or on with continuous shooting. I normally use the middle one. The difference is that with the bottom option in continuous shooting, the camera will not keep the individual images making the final blend. That's a setting if you want to shoot really fast. You have fewer options. The preview in your viewfinder is not the same. It's meant to go really fast. So I normally don't use it. You know, you shoot, and it blends it right away. It doesn't keep all the images. So I use a normal function, and I'll leave it at that. So the bottom row, I've got the camera on function control. I go to the second choice, which is multiple exposure control, and go there. And it gives me the choice for the blend modes: additive, average, bright, or dark. Like I said earlier, I normally don't use additive or average. I go for the extremes, either bright or dark, depending on the subject. Oh yeah, my camera will have it goes to 9 multiple exposure. Oh, that's the next slide, I think. Yeah. Number of exposure. The maximum number is typically 3 to 9, depending on your camera. I know my Fuji has 3 as a maximum, my Canon has 9. Next choice, which is the middle row, save source images. That's what it says. The choice is either all images or the result only. Like I said earlier, if you want to keep all, let's say 9 images, that's fine. The camera will add a number 10, which is the blended result. Or if you want just the resulting image, that's fine as well. Bottom choice is continue multiple exposure. Well, the choice there is one shot only or continuous. One shot only means that every time you do a sequence, 4, 5, 6 shots, the camera will automatically go back on disable multiple exposure. You have to turn it back on again. Or if you set it to continuous, you have to go in the menu to disable it manually. Otherwise, once you're done, the camera assumes you want to do another series for a multiple exposure. Normally, I use it on one shot only because I'll go back in the menu anyway to try different things. I'll change the blend mode. I'll go on, my ICM panning mode, which is a custom setting in my camera, which is automatically set at an ISO and a quarter of a second kind of thing. Oh yeah, bottom row in my camera, where you can select image for multiple exposure. If you want to select one of something you shot in the past that is on your card as your starting image, you can do that. And in fact, the camera will keep that image. It won't, write over it. It will keep it and then add more images as you wish. And what's there? Oh, yeah. My camera setting, my middle left image, that's C2V. That's my custom mode for panning. So the image to the right of that shows what I normally set it. It's a quarter of a second, ISO 200. I got the two second timer. And because I just go to C2 and I know all these settings are all set to go. I do this because I make typical mistake of, if I don't do this, it goes to auto ISO and I forget to set it and I get all kinds of different results. So I'd rather set it like this. And my, for a normal blend without panning, it's like at the bottom, I go aperture setting, auto ISO, 2 second timer, like you see on the bottom right. And what else? Just a reference, YouTube that explains a lot of this stuff on the internet. And by the way, all these slides, I'll put that in the Creative Sig forum tomorrow. And I will also upload the recording of this tomorrow.
Awesome. All right, any questions, comments for Norman? It's an incredible presentation, really well done. He made a complicated thing quite simple, I think.
Yeah. Is it, what was the timing? Oops, 40 minutes, not too bad.
That's perfect.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
If you don't move the camera, which that's the interesting part anyway, but let's assume you on a tripod, you're doing double or triple exposure like that. You get a picture that might look like an HDR.
Yeah, I guess so.
Because
well, the HDR changes the exposure for each shot, right?
what sorry, what did you say?
If you shoot HDR, you're automatically changing the exposure. I'm not.
This way, what you're doing is doesn't change the exposure.
No, normally I don't change the exposure.
Okay.
Other than the shutter speed for the panning, or if I want to do a composite with more than one shutter speed, and I'll change the shutter speed between.
Understand.
Oops. Yeah.
But if you stay still on a tripod, don't move your camera at all, you got triple exposure.
Yeah, you'll get exactly the same image. If you don't move at all,
it will get.
And if it's a blend mode, you'll get exactly the same shot at the end, because the camera doesn't know. It will.
That's right.
Whatever blend mode you have will give you the exact thing you started with. If you're not moving at all.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Understand. Okay. Thanks.
Hi, Normand. It's Gail
Yes.
Talkahani here.
Yes.
have a question. I noticed you use the dark mode quite a bit. Is that
Yeah.
something that when you look at it, technically you think that's what you want, or is it more artistic?
It's just an artistic choice. A lot of times I like the dark mode if I move a little bit to give it more of an impressionistic look. If I want I'm thinking flowers or something like this, I might go to a bright mode, and then you'll get more of a glow from shot to shot for the final results, because you'd say your flower is moving a little bit. And you saw in some of the shots of the wheel in Montreal, which had a real white structure, and I had gray clouds in the background. By moving a little bit, I knew that the white structure in the bright mode would come through. It would overlap the clouds in the background. But on the other side, if you want the clouds to come through, you go in a dark mode, and your background, if it's darker, it will, get preference at the end and the blended in the camera. I hope I made that clear a little bit.
Right. Okay. So Dan and I shoot a lot of Ballet Victoria, and I've
Yeah.
become quite intrigued with multiple exposure in camera. We're going there tomorrow. It's a black curtain background with the dancers. Would you use more of an average setting?
You could use average. No, be careful, because if you're moving, the camera will see the black. And I'm assuming that the dancers are typically in white or something lighter. So white on black, if the camera sees those pixels superimposed, it will give you gray. So if your dancers are white and the background is black, if you move a bit, the black curtains will always stay in the background, and the white of the dancers will, take dominance, and they'll come forward. They may, if you do a lot of overlapping, you get a bit of a glowy effect. Well, depending on your shutter speed, if you're very quick, then you'll be just the dancers.
Yeah, we usually shoot about 500 or 640 a second. So ISO, whatever, they like dark lighting, so it can go up to 15,000 or 12,500, whatever.
Yeah.
But we follow the dancers.
Are you trying to let the dancers move across the scene as you're shooting? Is that what you're trying to do? Okay. Then you'll get the dancers if they're in white against the black background, the dancers should come up clear in each position that you snap the shutter speed on top of the background, and it should be all sharp and like a movement sequence kind of thing.
Okay, and just to confirm, was that average mode or dark mode?
No, I would go with the bright. Because if you go average, your dancers will come out gray if they're in white. If they're dressed in white against a black background, in the blend mode, the camera and then the processing will try to average those pixels. So white on black, you'll end up with a gray dancer.
So
See what I mean?
You're suggesting using a white blend.
I would use,
mode.
if you want to see the dancers clearly in white, I would use the bright mode. But then you land.
Thank you. That should be an interesting day tomorrow. Thanks so much.
Oh yeah, but what's going to happen is the skin tones is actually lighter than the background. So you should be okay. You should see the dancers. If the dancers have anything on them that is dark, it may, depending if it's darker than the background, sometimes the light in the background makes it look lighter than actually pure black. So the background may come through on the very dark portions, or not the opposite of your dancers, right? You'll have to try.
Thank you. It'll be fun.
Good tips. Yeah. Is there a way to make a multiple exposure in camera by just selecting multiple images already in the camera?
I don't think so. I checked on the menu of my Canon. The only thing I can do is select the starting image and only one.
Mhm, right.
And then I take new images and the rest of the sequence. I can only pick the first one. I don't know what it is in other cameras. Looking at the chat.
Lots of positives in the chat, but I think that's pretty well most of the questions.
Yep.
All right. Well, maybe go ahead, Norman.
Just a final thing. If anybody has another question or you want to chat about this again, just call me. We can do a Zoom or whatever. If you want to go shooting, I'll go out shooting with you. I do it all the time. So,
Nice.
okay, I'll stop sharing. Oh, I'll stop the recording.